If we respect the boundaries that they set for us, we're allowing them to win. We're allowing their colonization to perpetuate. There are no boundaries in Africa as far as I'm concerned. As an African person, I feel like I can walk around the world and have no issues because African blood is what built this world. African blood is what built the United States. African blood is what built Europe. African blood is what built it all. So I can walk anywhere in this world and have no problems. Please trust and believe that. Hey y'all. So today I want to talk about South Africa and basically what's going on there today. For those of you who don't know, there has recently been a wave of violence against African foreign nationals that are living and working and owning businesses in South Africa. A lot of them have been killed. A lot of people have had their businesses burned down. A lot of their stores have been just decimated or looted. And it's all just because of the fact that they are foreign nationals and not South African natives. I just think that the reasons that we are seeing such hatred towards Africans, and it is towards Africans, it's not towards all foreign nationals. The reason that we're seeing such hatred towards Africans is deeply rooted in the history of colonization in Africa. And so I just want to talk about that. So everybody knows about the system of apartheid that existed in South Africa all the way until 1992. Everybody is aware of it. I guess it was really popularized, I feel like, towards the end of apartheid. Apartheid was actually an issue that went on from the 1940s. Even before that, apartheid stems from an issue of colonization. And so if you start at the turn of the 16th century in about 1495, that's when Europeans first encountered South Africans. That's when they started coming to the shores of South Africa. They realized that these were fertile lands and that they could use them for ports and for trading bases. The Dutch were the first to formally colonize South Africa for about 200 years until 1815, right after the Napoleonic Wars. The Dutch gave South Africa to the British, even though it really wasn't theirs to give. They gave it to the British, and it actually intensified when they realized that there were diamonds and gold that were natural resources to the land. The Dutch already were living separately because they had these kingdoms, I guess. They were called the Boer Republics, and they wanted to live separately and away from British colonization. With that in mind, the British, even though they did subdue the Boer Republics, they treated them a lot better and trusted them a lot more than the native Africans that were native to the land. Just because of the color of their skin, they just decided that these people were not actually able to govern themselves and that they should not be trusted and that their resources were not theirs. They didn't have any actual claim to it. That's why there are a lot of land issues in all of Africa to this day. In about 1910, South Africa was actually the first African country that was given independence. Now, it was only nominal, it was only a name, it was not actually in practice, but it was the first African country that was given independence, and I personally believe it was because of the presence of that white minority. The fact that there were Dutch who were born, they had 2 or 3 generations into South Africa, they were able to give the land to them and say that they gave an African country independence, when in reality they just gave Dutch people independence in Africa. So the people that lived in South Africa at the time, they were the native black Africans, obviously. They were also the descendants of the Dutch settlers that first colonized South Africa. There were the mixed peoples who came out of the unions of blacks and whites. There were also a lot of Indians because they were descendants of slaves that were brought over by the British, because the British also colonized India and had slaves in India. Of all the people that were living in the land, once the Dutch were able to rally for their own actual independence and they were able to get their own self-governance and autonomy from the British government, not South Africa, but when the Dutch in South Africa gained independence from Britain, it was 1931, and that's when apartheid kind of started to take its roots, and it was sold, actually. It was sold in full force to the white minority, who were the only ones that had voting rights, as something that would secure jobs for them. And the reason that that was so important, because of the race laws in South Africa at the time, blacks were not allowed to be armed, and so they couldn't fight in World War II. So all of the whites went off to war for the British in World War II, and the blacks secured all of the jobs in an empty job market because South Africa still had to have a labor force. And even though there was discrimination, the only people that were there that were left to work were black people. When apartheid came around, it was sold to them as something that would keep black people out of the job market and they would be able to get jobs. And of course, it would continue to enforce the fact that they would not be allowed to vote. which was very important because remember at the time, white people only made up like 10% of the nation. This continued all the way until 1992. The whites, again, after all of this global pressure, the whites voted for apartheid to end. And 31% of the South African white population in 1992 still chose to vote against ending apartheid. And 61% of the population voted to end apartheid, and so it ended. And then 2 years later, the government transitioned to the black government under Nelson Mandela, and that is when South Africa gained independence in truth. We have to understand, this was in 1994. So South Africa is a 25-year-old country, just to be completely fair. There is no judgment in this video. Even though, yes, the world is calling South Africa xenophobic, I'm not gonna judge this country because this country is 25 years old. From a place where I'm sitting in the United States, which, was formed in 1776, I don't believe that I really have the right to judge South Africa. And as a native Kenyan myself, we gained independence in the 60s. From my perspective, I feel like South Africa looks at race in a very distinct way. They came out of colonization a lot later than a lot of people did. And so the younger generation is living in the after effects of colonizations, while the older generations, the adult generations, have actually lived during apartheid. So they are coming out of a system where they are living in neighborhoods where they are forced to be there. They're overcrowded. They do not have the same social services that other citizens that are paying the same tax dollars as they are paying are receiving. Living in neighborhoods that are only black. That means that every time there is a crime committed, they are only seeing a black person commit that crime. They're seeing white people living in successful, sanitary, healthy areas. Their children are going to school and getting a better education than their children, having better jobs and opportunities than they have. And they're living lives understanding that black people are at a disadvantage. White skin is now affiliated with success. White skin is now affiliated with security, with safety. And black skin is now affiliated with crime, with disease. And it's the same rhetoric that we see to this day being propagated, saying that people of color are only bringing into our countries disease and crime. It's the same thing that's going on all over Europe today. It's the same thing that's going on in the United States today. It's the same thing that's going on in South America, and it's the same thing that's going on in South Africa today. People are seeing people of color as threats. They're seeing them as dangerous in a way that they shouldn't. And it's something that has been propagated by years of internalized racism because of colonization and slavery. Yes, they were colonized by the British, but there may not be too much of an acknowledgement of the fact that they were also colonized by the Dutch. They became the Boer republics and they laid claims to these lands, but again, they were occupying that land. So again, they don't view race based on white and black. They view race based on who was born in South Africa, who was natively born in South Africa. In South Africa, that is not the right way to judge. They do not have a claim to the land. Ironically, when the Dutch encountered South Africans, the South Africans that they encountered were Bantu people. Bantu people are actually all over Africa. Bantu people originated in Northwest Africa and they spread to the east and they spread to the south. I am a descendant of a Bantu person because I am a Meru. So my origin story as a Meru person is that I came from Bantu people who were in the north, who were escaping to the south, and they ended up in East Africa and Kenya. And that is how I came to be. So me having Bantu blood, why would you rather that I go and contribute to an economy of a white person's country rather than going to your country when we have the same blood? I am not your enemy. Look at who's actually causing you to live in the conditions that you're living in. Focus your attention on people that should be providing sanitary water to you. Focus your attention on the people that make sure that the people that are living in white South African neighborhoods, that those people have all of the services that they're paying for with their tax dollars. You're paying the same taxes, but they actually get what they need done. Their roads are better, their schools are better, their hospitals are better, their healthcare services are better. Everything that they are experiencing that is given from the government is at a better scale and at a higher level than it is given at black neighborhoods. And it is the same thing that is experienced everywhere around the globe where there is segregation between dark colored people and light colored people. But it's okay, that's for a different video. Look at it this way, South Africa. The top 3 job sectors that make up for more than half of the South African economy are community, which is like your teachers, your healthcare workers, the people that basically give you your social services. And then you have trade, which is just the buying and selling of goods. It can be, on a local level, it can be on a domestic level, it can be on an international level, and that's your trade sector. In your finance sector, you have your bankers, you have your investment banks, you have your real estate firms, the people that basically control the flow of money within the country. It's worth it to look at who's working at these different sectors. But regardless of all of that, I'm not even worried about who's working in those jobs. What South Africa needs to look at is who is hiring in those jobs. Who is putting these people in those positions, and why aren't they putting you in those positions? Understand that before you start coming for foreign nationals, because it's not foreign nationals that are making up those 3 job sectors. If you look at who's making up those job sectors, and if you look at who's hiring for those 3 job sectors, you'll find out your problem. You'll see who's oppressing you. And it has nothing to do with the Africans that are around you, the Africans that fought alongside you against apartheid for you to gain your independence with us. We are not your enemy. That's something that you have to understand if you're going to go anywhere in life, because if you don't have our support, you're not going to have anything, because the white people in your land are protected by their white people in Europe. Who do you have? If you have no one else, what will you do? You need us, and they know that you need us, and they're making sure that they perpetuate any violence, and they're making sure that they perpetuate any issues, any infighting that we might have, because this is a pattern. This is something that is done to Black people around the world to keep us divided, because they know that if we are united, we can conquer anything. That's the problem. If we sit here and allow them to divide us, we respect the boundaries that they set for us, we're allowing them to win. If we respect the boundaries that they set for us, we're allowing them to win. We're allowing their colonization to perpetuate. There are no boundaries in Africa as far as I'm concerned. As an African person, I feel like I can walk around the world and have no issues, because African blood is what built this world. African blood is what built the United States. African blood is what built Europe. African blood is what built it all. So I can walk anywhere in this world and have no problems. Please trust and believe that. That's just my little thoughts, y'all.